تيست. نايس. تيست.
شوف
قرطاس اللي كيتيرا.
يو دابا نشوف قاعد فاهمة؟
Capsule now approaching station. Stand clear of disembarking passengers. Careful, doors are now closed.
الترقيب هذاك يصير.
To their physical and mental limits. But the real lesson that our divisional officers will impart is that the Navy doesn't excel based on the individual, but as a team working together.
For those whose loved ones setting off today to begin their life in the Navy, stop by our friends and family group to get a better understanding of what they have to look forward to in naval service.
While training on one of the Navy forges on MacArthur, recruits will push themselves to their physical and mental limits. But the real lesson that our divisional officers will impart is that the Navy doesn't excel based on the individual, but as a team working together.
عضلات. Dérangeant, what is this sound? شي بومباردو مشق. كتكون دي فو دارتيفيس فايروركس.
Get an inside look at some of your favorite manufacturers' ships. Check the daily schedule for the... Please consult our maps to take advantage of all the exhibits this year's Invictus has to offer. Be sure to check back every day to see the full lineup of ships and technology now available to the UEE Navy. The Navy would like to thank our private and corporate partners for making this year's Invictus the best yet. The UEE Navy. United in purpose. Hello and welcome to the 2951 Invictus Expo Hall. Invictus Launch Week not only marks the graduation of the latest class of starmen and pilots entering service into the UEE Navy, but signifies the date that new recruits all over the Empire report to start their service. Duty, tradition, service. A life in the UEE Navy is about building a better universe for your loved ones. While at Invictus, take a moment to honor all naval starmen, past, present, and future, for faithfully defending the Empire. Remember, Invictus is an opportunity to celebrate those who are about to embark on their journey in the UEE Navy. Be sure to congratulate any new recruits you see. The UEE Navy, united in purpose. Hello and welcome to the 2951 Invictus Expo Hall. Celebrated since 2541, Invictus gives the public an opportunity to see the latest and greatest additions to the UEE Navy fleet. Ever want to see what life is like aboard a capital ship? This year's Invictus is offering a rare opportunity to explore an active duty Javelin destroyer. Get an inside look at some of your favorite manufacturers' ships. Check the daily schedule for directions. Please consult our maps to take advantage of all the exhibits this year's Invictus has to offer. Be sure to check back every day to see the full lineup of ships and technology now available to the UEE Navy. The Navy would like to thank our private and corporate partners for making this year's Invictus the best yet. The UEE Navy, united in purpose. Hello and welcome to the 2951 Invictus Expo Hall. Invictus Launch Week not only marks the graduation of the latest class of starmen and pilots entering service into the UEE Navy, but signifies the date that new recruits all over the Empire report to start their service. Duty, tradition, service. A life in the UEE Navy is about building a better universe for your loved ones. While at Invictus, take a moment to honor all naval starmen, past, present, and future, for faithfully defending the Empire. Remember, Invictus is an opportunity to celebrate those who are about to embark on their journey in the UEE Navy. Be sure to congratulate any new recruits you see. The UEE Navy, united in purpose. Hello and welcome to the 2951 Invictus Expo Hall. Celebrated since 2541, Invictus gives the public an opportunity to see the latest and greatest additions to the UEE Navy fleet. Ever want to see what life is like aboard a capital ship? This year's Invictus is offering a rare opportunity.
Navy flight training can provide the necessary training for a variety of jobs in the private sector. From combat to hauling applications, naval pilots receive the kind of training and experience that employers will seek out.
خير. خرجوها بدو تكريوها كراش العام الجاي. حرش هيك بحال نضرب الشب ولكن ماشي ضرب الشب. دائما بيضرب لك بالي قارن اللي نعرفوها الهامر هيد داكور RTX المقلوب rent everything.
Welcome to the Invictus ship hall. All of the vehicles you see on display are this year's additions to the fleet. With the expanding nature of operations throughout the system, have a look to see how each of these ships will help defend the Empire.
الخدامة اللي راح حاطينها بالكروسة هذا تفكير ما قدر
From combat to hauling applications, naval pilots receive the kind of training and experience that employers will seek out.
وما زال يجي يدير بحال نطيحة
For those with loved ones settlements, we give them. While fighters like the Hornets and
Déjà.
Engineers
عفوهم من تحت الأرض
what works, what doesn't in their ships. Navy flight training will provide the necessary training required. Naval pilots receive the kind of training and experience that employers will seek out. For centuries, Invictus has been a time for friends and family to come together and celebrate the pillars of duty, service, and civic pride.
مازال يس مازال ما خرجت عندنا ما نديرو
A time-honored tradition since 2541. Invictus Launch Week is an opportunity for the public and the UAE Navy to celebrate the next generation of men and women who are about to join
الفضاء
our
الخارجي
to
عندنا
defend the Empire and give you an opportunity to see the latest additions to our fleet of defenders. Please enjoy your day.
Hey you! Hey you! How are you?
expanding nature of operations throughout the system, we'll look to see how each of these ships will help defend the Empire.
نشوفوا ديال اخرى نتفرج. كنتمشاو.
The UEE Navy is proud to welcome Aegis Dynamics back to Invictus launch. Though they have created some of the most iconic and decorated naval ships in our history, their past was draped in shadow for decades. We are thrilled to see that they have truly committed themselves to building a brighter future.
هاي نديري فهادشي اخي.
هلا سرعون.
راهم غاديين هذاك الشيء كيقولوا غيديروا. انا دابا ما كنتقدرش فيه ما قالوش يديروه. نقول معليش واخا ما يديروش ماشي مشكل. كوسميتيك يلا هي اللي خاصنا نطلعوا فيها نرجعوا.
نايس.
ايوه
For those who love what SSD today, and beyond. With that kind of success, it's no wonder that the Navy expanded their roster of Aegis ships in their fleet.
حب علينا.
inspect the latest acquisitions of the UEE Navy.
دريب نجمعو معداتنا باش نرجعو له. قرر ناكلو دابا. ناكلو من دابا. باي. درينك. هيا. رضا.
The UEE Navy is proud to welcome Aegis Dynamics back to Invictus launch. Though they have created some of the most iconic and decorated naval ships in our history, their past was draped in shadow for decades. We are thrilled to see that they have truly committed themselves to building a brighter future.
Yes.
Ever want to see what life is like aboard a capital ship? This year's Invictus is offering a rare opportunity to explore an active duty Javelin destroyer. Get an inside look at some of your favorite...
I'm gonna get inside. Don't worry. But first, let me put some gear. Gear. Okay. Suit. أيوة. وأنا دي بكسكت. زوينة. ما عطونيش الكاسك.
Naval service.
One of the Navy forges on MacArthur recruits
Be sure to thank Star today.
don't تفتح راسك.
Celebration of the men and women stepping forward to defend the Empire.
Nearing next stop.
غير وصلتي.
Careful, doors are now closing. Nearing next stop.
سبيس بورت.
لا
دابا
Hi, I'm Tony Zervik, and I'm the Director of Persistent Universe for Star Citizen. Today I'm going to give you an update on how some of the back-end architecture and systemic functionality is coming along, what sort of progress we've made over the past year, what's on the horizon, and how all of this is going to impact your gameplay experience. In order to give you a more comprehensive understanding of the long-term direction and what all of this will ultimately mean, I'm going to cover areas that are in various stages of development and will sometimes resort to illustrative examples so that the underlying concept can be made more clear. First, a quick review. Quantum is a simulation of the game universe, and its purpose is to allow things, the price of goods at a given shop, the amount of piracy near a landing zone, or what missions are being offered, to evolve and change over time in logical and realistic ways. It does this by simulating hundreds of thousands of lightweight NPCs called quanta, whose AI logic is focused on just those aspects needed to produce the required information. Based upon a small list of attributes, each quanta makes its own decisions using the same resources, shops, and jobs as players. The simulation will need to calculate many millions of decisions per minute, and thus the AI behavior of quanta is focused on the most economically impactful details, which lets quantum focus all of its processing power on just those things that truly matter. Every quanta possesses its own unique set of attributes that influence how well it performs and how it perceives opportunities. The initial implementation of attributes will have two main categories: proficiencies and traits. Proficiencies act like a multiplier on how well quanta perform a given task. Different jobs will require different proficiencies, and higher proficiencies will equate to superior execution. Traits describe what kind of jobs a quanta prefers to do by modifying their perceived value of the job. Each job will have a specific alignment, and when a quanta's traits match up with the job's alignment, they will perceive the payout of that job to be higher. To illustrate the concept, let's take two jobs on either end of the aggression scale and suppose, for now, that they pay out the same. Now, let's create a quanta with an average aggression rating. This quanta is no closer to the aggression alignment of factory worker than they are to security, so it's no surprise that for this quanta, the payout for both jobs looks the same. However, as we decrease the aggression rating of this quanta, we can see that the perceived amount of money for both jobs changes. Again, the actual pay hasn't changed at all, only the perceived value from that quanta's point of view. It's still possible for the quanta to choose security, but in this case, security would need to pay 4 times as much. If we change this quanta's aggression trait to be very high, the opposite happens. Now, the aggressive security job looks like it pays much more, and the peaceful factory worker jobs appear to pay much less. Of course, jobs have more than a single trait to distinguish themselves. Suppose we take another aggressive job, pirate. With just one dimension, the pirate job would look just as lucrative to this quanta as the security job. We can differentiate between these two jobs by adding the morality trait and putting both of these aggressive jobs on the proper place on that scale. Now that all jobs have a unique combination of trait alignments, we can watch the perceived payout for all 3 of these jobs change, even though, in this case, all jobs actually pay the exact same amount. We're currently experimenting with 4 different traits, but expect to add at least a few more over time to help ensure that quanta do not congregate around the highest paying job at any given moment, and instead, just like a real population of individuals, all perform their own unique mental calculus to determine what looks most appealing to them, and in effect gives us the nice distribution of workers that we want. The quantum simulation that we ran at the last CitizenCon was implemented in TypeScript, a relatively slow language that limited us to less than 10,000 quantum. All of that logic has since been rewritten in C#, and a lot of time and effort invested into optimizing the threading and resource locking, which wound up increasing performance by more than 2 orders of magnitude. Stanton is one of the more complex solar systems and will require about 50 to 100,000 quanta in order to achieve the required fidelity, which means we've got a lot of extra headroom without any additional performance tuning to support upcoming solar systems like Pyro. Much like a real economy, quantum produces a tremendous amount of data, and there are countless ways to adjust the simulation. Finding a combination that produces the desired results is difficult, and in order to solve this problem, we created Odin, a plugin for the Python-based JupyterLab environment. Odin is a powerful web-based tool that allows for real-time data interpretation of the game's dynamic and complex economy based on the actions of both players in the live game and quanta. Here, I'm using Odin to simultaneously show all of the graphs related to the economy of aluminum, where it's mined, refined, manufactured, and sold around the Stanton system. It's a bit overwhelming, so I'm going to refine the search by adding the word buying to the Graph Explorer. Before seeing the actual graphs, we can preview which ones our search has identified, which is very useful in more complicated search scenarios. In this case, though, we've already whittled things down to a manageable size, so I'm going to jump to the actual graphs. Everything looks pretty healthy. You can see the cyclical nature of commodity prices, a sign that we're on the right track and getting the economic modulation we want. All of these graphs are updated from the simulation in real time, and we can zoom in on particular time periods of interest, which is invaluable when trying to figure out exactly why the availability of a critical resource dried up or the price of something went through the roof. With such a complex system, it's often difficult to predict what sort of information we might want to inspect, and Odin was therefore designed to be extremely flexible and adaptive. One particularly powerful data analysis tool that we developed allows us to view the flow of goods and services from a high-level perspective. We call it the Eİṛելի graph, and it can dynamically target economic flows and animate transitions so that we can visually see how things change over time. Here I've selected a number of different product nodes, and you can see all of the economic relationships for those items laid out on the graph. The graph allows us to switch between several key flows, like the volume of goods, the flow of UEC, and even the value density of specific routes in the universe. The nodes are ordered by greatest to least economic activity, and changes over time will reorder them. We can thus detect important shifts in the economy simply by observing how the nodes adjust their position. This tool can inspect both real-time and historical data, so we can step back in time and see the progression of factors that caused a problem to develop and what could be done to remedy it. When inspecting a segment of time, you can see elements of the economy phasing in and out, depending upon whether or not they were relevant during that period. Often we'll want to dig into a particular material to investigate how that material flows throughout the economy. With the Eİṛելի graph, we can choose a material like aluminum, and then all of the items that metal is used to construct, which immediately gives us an intuitive view of the relationships between manufacturing recipes and system-wide logistics from a bird's-eye view. Here, it looks like most of the raw aluminum in the economy is being funneled into items that are being sold in shops on Crusader and Artport. After a while, though, the shops at Crusader run short of inventory and stop selling such goods, and all the sales move to Hurston and Artport. As new materials, recipes, and items are added to an increasingly complex universe and player behaviors shift, we'll frequently run into such problems, and analytical tools like the Eİṛելի graph will be invaluable in helping us to quickly identify such issues and determining what needs to be done to restore balance. Player actions are fed back into Quantum so that it can factor that data into the simulation, and Odin can evaluate that information just as easily as it can that derived from Quantum. It's fully linked into the law system, for example, and can thus generate a heat map showing where players are committing specific crimes. If there's too much PvP in an area that's supposed to be secure, we might add more security, place additional turrets, or increase the penalties levied by the law system. To be clear, Odin's analytical and statistical capabilities will be of extensive benefit to the quantum simulation too, as they'll allow it to better understand how to adjust various dials and levers to allow for a dynamic universe where things logically ebb and flow and everything functions as part of a larger, more complex machine. Quanta focused on transporting goods, for example, will demand a price premium based upon how much risk they'll be exposed to on their route, and Odin can sort all of the possible paths they might take by risk, fuel consumption, or whatever other metric they wish to consider so that they can decide whether they're interested in the job, and if so, what sort of payment they would require. Here's a bar graph showing where all of these felons are spending their time, and another one showing how they're spending their money. Odin can identify the most popular mining sites as well as what materials are being extracted from those locations. It knows what sort of ships players are flying, how many players are on board, and what sort of ships they're squaring off against. Odin has complete knowledge of the mission system, which allows it to map player positions against the missions they've accepted. In one shot, then, we can get a sense of which missions players find most interesting, so that we can focus on creating more of that type of content, and where those missions are taking them, so that we can understand sections of the solar system that are underutilized. One of the most interesting graphs we've created is this one that measures mission design quality. Each circle represents a mission, and larger circles indicate that more players have done that particular mission. The x-axis details the percentage of players that successfully completed the mission out of all of the players who completed it. And the y-axis denotes the percentage of players that finished the mission even if they failed it. This exposes all sorts of interesting insights to us. Low positions on the graph, for example, indicate that most players are getting a result other than success or failure. They're either abandoning the mission or disconnecting, neither of which is good. Positions on the far left mean that most of the players that undertook that mission failed it. The lower left quadrant signifies missions that are abandoned frequently and fail when they aren't, which likely points to a problem. Missions near the lower right have a high success rate, but are frequently abandoned, possibly indicating that they're too easy or boring. The most interesting missions are in the upper middle. They're frequently played through to the end, but aren't always successful. These are the missions that are both engaging and difficult. We use information like this to tune the simulation, but also to give us basic feedback on what sort of missions players find most appealing and where problems reside. The refining gameplay that was released late last year made use of a couple of new back-end services. The job service is more general purpose and will also be a key component in the implementation of a number of other upcoming features, including everything from cargo loading and unloading to repair, refuel, and restocking services. The refining service provides game servers with the ability to retrieve a refiner's available processing capacity and a price quote for a given quantity of material with the specified speed and quality options. These new services exemplify the way that development nowadays often proceeds, which is to ensure that all of the linkage to and from the data source is properly abstracted from the start, such that once Quantum can provide the necessary data, we can flip a switch to activate it. Previously, when Quanta traveled to a planet or a moon to mine a resource, they picked a random location on the surface. This meant that Quantum wasn't yet capable of generating the spatial fidelity we needed so that we could properly determine exactly where NPCs should and shouldn't be found. The resource service that we completed last year, however, provides Quantum with an API that not only gives it access to this information, but also enables those amounts to be modified so that as players in Quantum mine an area, it will gradually be depleted. To demonstrate, I brought up a planet. Now, I'm going to highlight the location of all of the gold ore. Players in Quanta, of course, would not have this information, and to represent that fact, I'm going to place a shadow over everything. You can see a single quant exploration ship approaching the planet from the right. As it travels across the surface, it will unveil the quantity and location of that ore, visually represented by removing the shadow, and then broadcast that information to other quanta within its organization. It has discovered a huge vein of valuable ore, and quantum miners have now started arriving en masse to extract it. They're focusing predominantly on those areas where the concentration is known to be highest, although they'll also consider things like the amount of risk in a given area, perhaps caused by a player or NPC organization fighting to control that region. I'm running this at an accelerated rate, and you can see that the amount of ore at that first large site is declining rapidly. The explorer has now discovered a second field of gold ore near the equator, and because the original deposit has now been mined so extensively, what remains is more time-consuming and difficult to extract, and is thus relatively less attractive. The Quant have figured this out, and most of them have started to focus their attention on the newer site. Taken together, these new features allow Quantum to generate a lot more detailed information, which will in turn result in a better and more realistic gameplay experience. Quantum will know where exactly on the surface of a planet NPCs might be found and what they should be doing. It will understand the value of knowledge and factor its acquisition, sharing, and sale into its calculations, including what any information you eventually attempt to sell would be worth. Quantum has now been pretty thoroughly integrated into our backend architecture, and the service will be built and shipped with all future releases of the game, which took a considerable amount of time and effort given how different some of its tools and technologies were versus what we had already set up and configured. There's still a tremendous amount of work to do on the simulation side, but we are getting close to the point at which portions of its simulated data will be an improvement over the algorithmic logic embedded into various services. We're going to do a bit more testing before we enable it to start injecting that data into the live game though, and even then we're going to start very small and limit the focus to a few select areas so that we can work out any problems. The first couple of commodities for which Quantum will gain the ability to dictate the price will be fuel and repair materials. We're also going to allow it to control the amount of piracy and possibly transport freighters and security in a few test locations, but keep in mind that until more of the data behind the curtains is exposed, the modulation may at times seem a bit arbitrary. We're going to be more aggressive with service beacons, and we'll soon move most of that responsibility, the type of beacon being offered, the location, the reward, and the difficulty, to Quantum. Our primary focus right now is less on getting a lot of data moving back and forth, and more on getting all of the technological plumbing working properly. In order to properly calculate fuel prices, for example, Quantum needs to have a concept of fuel, what type of ships Quanta are using, and fuel efficiency, none of which it previously had. In order to gauge the demand for repair services, ships in the simulation need a concept of damage, which didn't previously exist. There's often a lot of service work involved in allowing new types of data to flow between Quantum and the game. With iCache now largely complete, we've been able to shift some resources around, and within the last month have now doubled the number of engineers working on the systemic functionality. As a result, we're now in the early stages of a number of critical new services, including everything from the air traffic control service that's required for server meshing, to the NPC scheduler that will enable dynamic populations, to the virtual AI service that is necessary for the next major feature I'm going to discuss. Star Citizen's AI architecture is broken up into 3 distinct levels. The high-fidelity characters that you see in the game execute subsumption logic on a server, and this is far and away the most computationally expensive of the 3 types of AI. It's got a similar sense-think act cycle as the other AI, but because you can see the NPCs as they execute their tasks, there's often little to no potential for cheating or simplification. Something as simple as sitting in a chair requires a lot of item searching, animation, raycasting, collision detection, and more. This is a problem because in Star Citizen we're trying to simulate entire solar systems, and we can't afford to execute this kind of expensive logic for tens of thousands of characters that players can't even see. So we do what many games do and temporarily suspend any AI that's not in proximity to a player. This creates another roadblock though, because you can't effectively simulate an economy when portions of it are constantly being shut down and restarted, and it's the fundamental reason why Quantum exists. Merging these 2 AI extremes, subsumption and Quantum, solves our basic problem. NPCs look and act exactly as you'd expect when you can see them, and the universe's economic wheels always remain in motion. There's one major flaw, however, with this solution. The heavyweight subsumption NPCs that you can see and interact with don't execute any AI logic when you're not around, and thus they're severely limited in what they can do and when they can do it. Solving this issue is the responsibility of a middle-tier systemic logic that I call virtual AI. Virtual AI allows virtual NPCs, VNPCs for short, to seamlessly transition back and forth between the fully realized and physical world of subsumption and a far more efficient intangible back-end ether where they retain the ability to interface with elements of the systemic architecture just like a player. This technology is going to unleash a lot of new and exciting gameplay, but it's going to take more than a few sentences to properly explain what I'm talking about, so let's walk through it all in more detail. This is the Stanton solar system. You can see the 4 planets, ArcCorp, Hurston, Microtech, and Crusader. I'm going to zoom into the Crusader planetary area, and you can see its 3 moons, Yela, Daymar, and Selen, and the space station Port Olisar. You can imagine looking at that station, hundreds of NPCs going about their lives. This is how you think of the universe, always in motion, always changing, always real regardless of whether you're actually looking at it or not. As I mentioned though, that's an illusion. We can't afford it. When you're not looking, the server deactivates and unloads a lot of unnecessary baggage, but a wide assortment of back-end services retain knowledge of everything that really matters and provide an active interface to those systems. NPCs outside of landing zones are treated differently. Quantum accumulates statistical information for where NPCs should reside and what they should be doing from its quanta, which allows us to determine how often you should see a pirate or what a freighter you run into should have in its cargo hold. These areas are called probability volumes, and the important thing to note is that the NPCs they create are ephemeral. They pop into existence for a brief moment so that the area you're viewing looks like what Quantum says it should, and once they're sufficiently far from any players, are completely and forever destroyed. I'm going to add a player here, which you can see off to the left. As they pass by Daymar, they're in range of a probability volume that eventually decides they should encounter a pirate. So a pirate is created and engages the player, and after a bit the player decides that they're outmatched and decides to run. Once they're sufficiently far from that NPC, it's destroyed. It doesn't persist in any fashion and you'll never see them again. The player continues traveling to Port Olisar, and the translucent green wireframe indicates that the area isn't loaded on the server, and thus the subsumption AI isn't active. I'm going to add a VNPC in a moment, but first let's quickly recap what makes them so different. VNPCs always execute some form of AI logic, regardless of whether or not they are in proximity to a player. Virtual AI is extremely lightweight and computationally efficient, stripping out all of the expense related to visuals and unnecessary details, yet retains the full ability to interact with the game in the ways that truly matter. Virtual AI executes within a back-end service and can thus easily be scaled and doesn't put any load on the servers. VNPCs can seamlessly transition back and forth from lightweight, back-end-driven AI entities to full-blown, subsumption-driven NPCs, and are thus indistinguishable from an NPC that really did execute expensive subsumption logic all the time. Lastly, VNPCs gradually build up their own unique histories as they live out their lives. They evolve. Okay, so back to the example. Once the player gets close enough to Port Olisar, that area is streamed into existence, loaded onto a server, and the NPCs initialized to resume whatever they should be doing at that time of day. Now I'm going to introduce a VNPC pirate near the player, and they're going to immediately attack. After a few moments, the VNPC comes out ahead in this battle, and the player is killed. Because their crime was committed in range of an active comrade, it's recorded in their character history along with the time and location of the felony. An upcoming tracking app will allow you to access information like this if you've registered with the local authorities, so that the digital footprints players and VNPCs leave behind can be tracked. This VNPC's name is Dragon, and since they're now wanted in this jurisdiction, the comrade has affixed a real-time marker to his position. With the only player in this area dead, the server now streams Port Olisar and the comrade out, but as I previously noted, VNPCs aren't destroyed like a regular NPC created from a probability volume, and their logic isn't suspended like an NPC at a landing zone. Instead, VNPCs simply transition from their physicalized state, where authority over their actions is controlled by subsumption logic executing on a server, to their native ethereal state, where their virtual AI executes on the back end. Dragon now begins to exit the area, and the comrade continues to track his position until he passes out of range, at which point the real-time information converts to a last known position report. He's decided that he needs money and he's a bit risk-averse, so he elects to head all the way out to Yella, where there are quite a few transport freighters carrying valuable ore and little in the way of security. Okay, Dragon has arrived at Yella's asteroid field and has now crossed back into range of another active comrade, so his real-time position is now once again being reported as indicated by both the character history and the tracking marker. There aren't any players in this area, and thus none of this is streamed onto a server. Everything you're seeing is a result of a variety of different services communicating with one another. VNPCs trigger probability volumes just like players, and Yella's shows that there's quite a bit of freighter traffic in this area. So Dragon won't have to wait very long before he generates an encounter. There's one. Dragon just caused the creation of a freighter, which itself becomes a VNPC so that it can react to what's happening via its own virtual AI. Dragon now engages the freighter. He starts firing on it. He's still within range of an active comrade, and thus this latest crime is added to his character history. He's now wanted for both murder and piracy, and the bounty on him just jumped from 6 to 10,000 UEC. Increasing the size of their rap sheet and the price on their head is one of the simplest forms of VNPC evolution, and over time we'll look to add additional ways for VNPCs to grow and increase their influence, from recruiting followers in an attempt to become a shipping magnate or a crime boss to offering their own missions. The captain of that freighter isn't going to surrender so easily. He's broadcast a combat assist service beacon that players can choose to accept, and he's offered a 3,000 UEC reward for his protection. Unfortunately for him, he's pretty heavily outmatched and he's quickly destroyed, causing the service beacon to expire before anyone can come to his aid. Bits of information like this are fed back to Quantum, and in sufficient quantity will cause all sorts of things to change. How much security patrol missions in that area pay, what transports that have to travel through that area will demand as a risk premium, and how much a ship in distress will offer for someone to come to their aid. The freighter's destruction has left some debris and possibly a few items of value, so if a player had already been en route, they might arrive to find the aftermath. Another murder has now been attributed to Dragon, and the bounty on him just once again jumped, this time from 10 to 14,000 UEC. He took a bit of damage from that encounter and is eventually going to need some repairs. A harder working pirate might look to plunder a few more freighters before heading back, but Dragon's personality attributes indicate that once he's got enough cash to cover the basics, he's more interested in drinking and gambling than piracy. So he leaves the area, and once again the real-time location tracking ceases once he's out of range of the comm array. He's heading back to Port Olisar, which is the closest location that has everything he wants. A fence to sell his stolen goods, shops to repair and restock his ship, and a bar where he can spend the remainder of his cash. The comm array near Port Olisar has been disabled, which means that Dragon's position isn't updated upon approach. The area remains devoid of any players, and thus it's still not streamed into memory. Dragon can therefore remain in his ethereal state and avoid a lot of computational expense related to maneuvering his ship, but he still needs to interface with the air traffic control service to request a landing pad and transition from his ship to the station. Services like this are always fully operational and accessible to VNPCs. That landing request is logged to his history though, so while the disabled comm array would make it a bit harder for a bounty hunter to track him, there are lots of other ways by which locational information on a character can be obtained. Dragon needed to refuel and repair his ship, and you can see those actions reflected in his history as he interfaces with the shop service that controls those operations. When a VNPC transitions to a landing zone that's streamed in, the virtual AI service that drives their logic temporarily cedes control of the character to the NPC scheduler that specifies who resides at what location. This is the same foundation upon which the dynamic populations feature will be built, except that it will be Quantum instead of the virtual AI service dictating the changes in the population. The end result is that if a VNPC is assigned to a landing zone and you're at that location, you can run into them like any other NPC. Dragon is now hanging out in the local bar, which was added to Port Olisar for the purposes of this demo. If you were to walk into the bar at this moment, he'd be physicalized with the rest of the environment and you'd actually see him there. Dragon eventually gets his fill of entertainment, or maybe he just runs out of money. Either way, it's back to work, and he'll be jetting back to Yellow to try and prey on more unprotected cargo ships. So he contacts air traffic control to get clearance to leave the area and departs. The same player that Dragon first encountered and killed is looking to exact some revenge, though, and claim the big bounty on Dragon's head. They've surmised that there might be a pattern to Dragon's movement and think that he might head back out to Yellow. So, they position themselves between Port Olisar, where they know that Dragon just left, and Yella and activate a quantum interdiction field. Dragon, still in his lightweight ethereal form, initiates a quantum jump from Port Olisar to Yella and, just like a player, routes that movement through the probability volume service that is responsible for interdictions. Once he gets within range of the player's interdiction bubble, his jump is interrupted, and he transitions from executing virtual AI on the back end to a full-blown subsumption-driven AI executing logic on a server, so that the two of them can battle it out. If the player once again gets the worst of it, they might decide to change up their tactics a bit and wait to see if Dragon soon returns to Port Olisar, where they could try to sneak up on him on foot. The ultimate objective for Star Citizen has always been a dynamic and evolving universe. Historically, however, our mission content has always been static. We've had no ability to modify it after we pushed a version out the door. Missions have also been confined to a single server, each of which was thus its own little island, cut off and oblivious to whatever was happening elsewhere. Environmental data that applies to all of the servers, what items the shop offers for sale, how many freighters or pirates are in a given region of space, or what missions are available at a landing zone, couldn't be altered by the instance mission logic that executes on individual servers, since we didn't yet have a means of coordinating those efforts. The end result has been a universe that often feels static and fails to offer sufficient variety. Dynamic events are a special type of mission intended to help remedy this problem. They are modular chunks of configurable content that might involve anything from throwing a simple wrench into the wheels of the systemic economy to a prison break that stresses the law system to a full-blown invasion of a solar system. Dynamic events are global in nature. They affect the entire array of servers. They do this via extensions to the mission language that allow them to declare what logic runs in parallel on every server and what executes on the back end, while at the same time gaining the ability to query and modify a lot of global data. This allows us to keep the critical elements of these scenarios synchronized across all the servers while retaining the flexibility for every server to have its own unique state. Conceptually, the servers control the battle and the back end manages the war. The Xeno threat mission that we released in the first quarter was a dynamic event. It was triggered manually, although Quantum will eventually gain the ability to automatically activate these scenarios when conditions warrant. If, for example, the amount of piracy in an area gets out of control, Quantum might search through the mission library to find a dynamic event compatible with an elevated amount of piracy, and then customize and instantiate that scenario so that a lot of handcrafted content, unique character dialogue, challenges, rewards, can be blended into the universe simulation. We're aiming for the best of both worlds then, a systemic universe that provides a logically consistent background environment with the ability to overlay content and storylines that writers, designers, and many others have spent a lot of time creating. This is Quasar, a new tool that lets us manage dynamic events in the live game. It's linked to the same star map as Quantum and has access to much of the same information. I'm looking through the library of available events, and as I select each one, you can see the input parameters that can be used to customize that particular scenario. We've got quite a few of these at different stages of development, with Fleet Week, Ninetales, and Infiltrator being the next few in the pipeline. I'm going to walk you through a simple dynamic event called Quasar Demo that will show off a few of the systemic hooks we've linked into the mission system. But first I need to specify the inputs. The first thing that it requires is a location, and I'm going to select Port Olisar by simply clicking on the star map. The next couple of variables require a ship type. I'm going to specify Idris for the Defender input and Cutlass Black for attackers. If Quantum were to programmatically trigger an event like this, it'd fill in variables like these with something that made contextual sense. So, for example, it'd be looking at what sort of ships were in the area where the event would be activated to determine what it could consider. The next variable relates to difficulty, which in this particular case has simply been configured to dictate the speed at which enemies will appear. The last input, enemies remaining, indicates how many enemies must be destroyed in aggregate across all of the servers in order for the war phase to be completed and the victory phase to be activated. I'm going to set this to 10. With everything configured, I can now activate the event. Quasar communicates this request to the dynamic mission service, which then initializes the backend logic, allocates the global variables, sets up the phase conditionals, informs all of the servers to start any instance logic the event might contain, and quite a bit more. I'm now going to flip over to Quasar's active tab so that we can check the event's real-time data. You can see that there's currently just a single event active, but we could just as easily activate multiple and give each of them a different set of inputs. Dynamic events organize changes to backend data in coordinated chunks of logic called phases, and the phases that have been created for this event can be seen at the top right. They're all inactive now, hence the red color, and will turn green if their conditional evaluates to true, at which point their embedded logic would execute. The event's global variables are shown below that, and it's in this area that you can see the enemy's remaining variable for which we previously specified an input value of 10. Lower still are the functions for this event that have been marked external and which allow us to manually or programmatically call functions to customize aspects of the event after it's already been launched. The list of items that a shop offers to buy or sell has always been static. Phases, though, can include shop modifiers, which open the door to dynamically changing all sorts of shop-related information. To test this, I'm going to bring up a client window so that we can see what Port Olisar's admin office is currently buying. I've minimized the inventory for this test, so I'm only expecting to see a couple of items. That's the full list right there, just hydrogen and processed food. The modify shop phase has been set up to activate when the backend variable called current phase has a value of 1, so I'm going to set it to that. The phase just turned green, meaning that it's enabled, and any changes to the backend data have now been applied. It applied a shop modifier to crank up the demand for food at Port Olisar, so let's see what's happening to the price. It was stable for a long time with just some minor fluctuations. Now, though, it's gone through the roof, the direct result of all that increased demand. So players and Quanta would be incentivized by higher prices to help correct this imbalance in the economy. This phase also had a shop modifier add a new item for purchase, and you can see that Quantum already knows about it. I'm going to flip back to the client, though, so that we can verify that this really did affect the inventory within the game. Sure enough, the shop is now looking to purchase a new item, medical supplies. Manual control over the economy like this is not intended to be a substitute for Quantum's systemically derived adjustments, but simply gives us the ability to occasionally nudge the system in a particular direction to add some interest or layer a compatible story onto the background environment or an existing trend. Quantum will then take these influences, factor them into the simulation, and output how everything changes in response so that all of the rough edges are smooth. While we're looking at prices, I want to show off another new feature that will go out the door within the next few months. As designers gain the ability to write mission logic that can properly affect systemic change, temporary price imbalances will become more common, and we wanted to have a way for the system to actively reach out and inform you rather than relying upon you constantly having to check in on an area to discover that there's an opportunity. If we wait just a bit longer, the admin office is going to reach a point where it's so desperate for food that it's going to start reaching out, looking for ways to obtain more supply. It will do this by sending a message that will be recorded in a special area of your journal reserved for price alerts, which is basically a precursor to being able to create and post missions. You can see the message there indicating that the Port Olisar admin office needs food and what they're willing to pay for it. This feature gives designers the ability to dictate at a systemic level how shops will respond to inventory gluts and shortages, and this functionality will soon be extended to things other than commodities. An area suffering from too much piracy, for example, might offer to pay mercenaries to come to their aid. This is fundamentally different than the brute force tactics we currently rely upon to create missions and dictate when they're available, and is far more flexible and powerful. What you're really seeing here are the first signs of the dynamic mission system starting to flicker to life, and once it hits full stride, it's going to transform the gameplay experience. Next, let's take a look at how dynamic events allow encounter probabilities and interdiction frequencies to be adjusted.
Have a pleasant stay.
This is the probability volume around Port Olisar. You can see that piracy, the red curve, and security, the blue, are inversely related. All things being equal, if you increase the amount of security, you'll get less piracy and vice versa. Security tends to congregate closer to the landing facilities and dissipate as you get farther out, and thus piracy tends to gradually increase with distance. The likelihood of an encounter is represented by the height of the curve at that distance. Notice that the chances of running into a freighter, the green curve, is pretty much constant because once a ship has decided to make the journey to or from Port Olisar, it's committed. They've already decided whether or not the risk is worth the reward of traveling the full route. I'm now going to activate the lockdown phase of this event, which is going to crank up the amount of piracy in the selected area and overwhelm security. The red curve, piracy, now has a much larger average height, equating to an increased encounter probability, and because pirates now greatly outnumber security, the curve pushes in much closer to the landing zone. The criminals are emboldened because there's no longer sufficient security to deter them. The blue curve, security, looks identical, although Quantum will, over time, start adjusting the economic levers to gradually increase the amount of security to combat the threat by offering greater rewards. Increased piracy has had an immediate impact, though, on freighter traffic, which has dropped precipitously. This means that the local economy will start to seize up. They won't be able to import food, medicine, fuel, or whatever else they need, and they won't be able to export whatever goods and services they produce. All of these knock-on effects are only possible because designers will now be able to nudge the economic gears in proper systemic fashion. Let's test one of these knock-on effects. Now that we've adjusted the encounter probabilities, let's see what that does to quantum travel in the area. I'm going to once again bring up a game client, this time so that we can watch an Avenger Titan jumping to Port Olisar. This is a short jump and the chances of interdiction would typically be very slim. Now that we've injected a much larger pirate presence around that location, however, that's no longer the case. We got ejected from our jump as soon as we got within range of those elevated pirate probabilities, which means that getting to Port Olisar just got a lot more difficult and time-consuming, and will remain that way until the threat is addressed. We're now to the point where we can allow programmatic modification of these data structures, and Quantum will soon start adjusting these automatically, so that all sorts of things within the universe start to ebb and flow. What all of this really means is that, even when you know that you can buy medical supplies dirt cheap at one location and sell them for a hefty profit at another, we can finally start to adjust some of the systemic elements to justify the disparity. In short, if you wanted to take advantage of Port Olisar's elevated prices right now, you'd have to fly the last mile at conventional speeds and we'll probably see quite a bit of combat. That's going to drive up how long it takes you to make the run. You're probably going to burn quite a bit more ammo and require more repairs than would otherwise be the case, and you might want to think about recruiting some armed escorts to help you through the dangerous areas. Once the risk abates, once players in Quanta have dispatched enough of the pirates so that travel within this area returns to normal, you'll be able to much more easily deliver medical supplies to Port Olisar, but of course that increase in supply will quickly shrink the price differential. Now let's take a look at how each server can host part of a larger event while the things that really matter can remain synchronized. I'm going to enable the war phase by calling the start war function. That's going to create some staged battles involving the ship types we selected earlier around Port Olisar, the area that we previously selected. I brought up a couple of different client windows, each of which represents a different server. As each cutlass is destroyed on either server, the shared variable called enemies remaining is decremented. Once that variable reaches 0, the war phase will automatically terminate and the victory phase will be activated. That's it. The counter just hit 0 and you can see the change in the active phases over in Quasar. That last phase, Victory, kicked off some fireworks around Port Olisar, and just like any other phase change, that will automatically be synchronized across all of the servers. Just to make sure that things are back to normal, I'm going to check Port Olisar's admin office and see what's happening with the inventory and prices. They're no longer looking to purchase medical supplies, and with the pirate threat eliminated, players in Quanta can once again quickly and safely reach Port Olisar. As a result, the cost of food has started to fall off a cliff and will soon return to something close to its pre-crisis levels. I've covered a lot of ground today. Quantum has matured considerably since you last saw it. The performance issues have been resolved, it's been made compatible with our back-end infrastructure, and it's now communicating with numerous gameplay services. Lots of new analytical tools and functionality have been added, and increased fidelity in areas like quanta attributes and the spatial positioning of resources have allowed us to improve the accuracy of its output. We're now in early stage testing to allow Quantum to start pushing the first few bits of simulated data out the door and start impacting the game, and we expect to go live with these efforts later this year. The first stones in the Virtual AI Foundation were laid long ago, but it's only been within the past couple of months, as engineering resources rolled off of some other major initiatives, that the implementation effort has really started to take off. This technology will allow VMPCs the freedom to operate and evolve independently of player actions and open up all sorts of new gameplay possibilities. Bounty Hunter V2 will be the first feature to exploit virtual AI, but it's really just the tip of the iceberg insofar as what we eventually plan to do with it. Some of the Virtual AI Tech Foundation will beget other important features, like the ability to dynamically adjust the size and composition of the populations at landing zones. Dynamic events are the culmination of several major technological components coming together, from the Dynamic Mission Service to Quasar, and are already a reality. We shipped the first one, Xeno Threat, in the first quarter and have a number of others at various stages of development for release later this year and next. Many of these initial releases will serve as testing boards for new features, from shop and probability volume modifiers to spawn closets and the dynamic generation of nav meshes. Dynamic events give us the ability to modify the universe in dramatic or subtle fashion whenever we want, and to seamlessly blend those changes into the quantum simulation so that everything looks and feels natural. All of this will ultimately mean a more interesting, realistic, and exciting universe for you to explore and experience. I hope that this presentation has given you a good sense of what we've been doing over the past year and what those efforts will mean for the game in the coming one. Until next time.
Take a look around and get an up-close look at an active military vessel.
Yeah,
Some of the actual crew members have graciously volunteered their time to explain what life is like aboard the ship. I would like to remind you that the entire ship is not available for exploration, so please be respectful of unauthorized areas. Thank you, and
لا
enjoy your
غادي
visit.
نحاول ندخل انوتورايز هادي. دقيقة. أخوتنا راهما.
All right, let's settle down. My name's Lieutenant Commander Alderman. I run the turret complement aboard the Warhammer. That means I'm in charge of coordinating fire between our various gunners during a combat engagement in order to maximize combat effectiveness. But when we aren't in combat, I strive to keep my team sharp by running through engagement drills and simulated encounters. Now, the Javelin comes standard with 15 turrets, 13 of which have embedded operators. There are 6 turrets like the one you see here that run along the side of the ship, each of which is equipped with a pair of size 7 cannons for larger targets and a pair of size 4 Gatlings for smaller targets like fighters and even incoming missiles and torpedoes. We've got 4 more turrets on the bow of the ship, armed with size 7 energy cannons and 3 gunners on the underside with the same. All this firepower is coupled with a heavy payload of ordnance to make the Warhammer a real problem for all sizes of ship. Hence why we can be tasked to operate independently on patrols without support from the rest of the battle group. During the Xeno threat incursion, our gunners were responsible for the destruction of over 70 hostile elements and several capital ships, as well as protecting the ship from incoming ordnance. As a special treat, we've safetied this turret so you can get a taste of what it feels like to be a gunner. All the weapons have been deactivated, so don't worry about accidental discharge. But I'll remind you this is an active military vessel, so be respectful all the same. Thank you, and have a great Invictus.
Aegis combat assist activated. Systems green.
يقول لك كانوا قداش.
We're sorry. You've exceeded the allotted time to depart. We will have to return your ship to storage. Initiating ship storage procedure. For your safety, please vacate the area. Thank you for your cooperation.
All right,
Initiating
let's
ship
settle
storage
down.
procedure.
My name's
For your safety,
Lieutenant
please
Commander
vacate the
Alderman.
area.
I run the
Thank you
turret
for your
complement aboard
cooperation.
the Warhammer. That means I'm in charge of coordinating fire between our various
ناس ويندوز. دق على الحلقة.
Hi folks, welcome to the Warhammer. I am leading Starman Detmer, and this, as you've probably guessed, is one of the 2 barracks on the ship. And I know, you must be thrilled to see where Navy personnel sleep, and let me be the first to tell you, it's every bit as exciting as promised. Javelins are pretty great when it comes to sleeping arrangements, as they have enough bunks for the full crew, which is amazing because it avoids situations known as hot bunking, where you swap out bunks with somebody on the opposite shift, and that is horrible. This one time on my old ship, I had to share with this guy who had just the worst smelling socks. And I'm talking, you know, the military could have weaponized it kind of bad. And I had to try and fall asleep with that every day. So, yeah, after that, these bunks are a dream. And I'm just thinking that, actually, I don't think my CEO would like me talking about how bad hot bunking is. So maybe just forget I said anything. Anyway, each one has special slots for personal effects, and is capable of sealing you up to give you a little privacy, as people are always moving around the barracks. Sleeping schedules shift slightly too, so they can activate the full crew at a moment's notice if the ship enters heavy combat, you know. So you're kind of always sleeping with one eye open. I mean, we get shorter sleep schedules if we are patrolling dangerous space, so, I mean, you're already grabbing sleep when you can, and... Sorry, I am rambling. Otherwise, yeah, I'm not sure what to tell you. This is where we sleep. Not a whole lot of mystery to it. But I hope this has been enlightening. Please have a look around if you like, but don't touch anything in the bunks, as this is an active ship, and everything in here is the property of the crew. So, be cool.
ماشي خاسرة. رنقي
Hello everyone, my name's Lieutenant Horrigan, and as you can probably tell, this is Warhammer's mess hall. Definitely one of the more popular spaces on the ship. The mess has a fully automated dispensary since we operate on rotating shifts. We have a standard crew complement of 65 to 70, and meals need to be available at all times, so we have a culinary team always on duty, ready to lend support. Famous pilot Eİṛելի was once quoted as saying, if you ever want to take the temperature of a ship's crew, spend 20 minutes in their mess. Now this is one of the main social areas of the ships where crew members from different departments can catch up in their own downtime. We also use the mess for social events like birthdays, holidays, and promotions, since it's able to hold so many people. Our skipper, Captain Medcalf, is a big believer in casual gatherings. It's in an effort to entrench camaraderie. So we're in here pretty often. Now, you've probably noticed our games in the corner, so I'll just address the question that everyone asks. Yes, it's pretty competitive. The XO currently has the score to beat. Anyway, I'd like to invite you to have a look around.
Well, this sucks.
مكتب يوجد لول تديروا لنا مساخر يعذبوا في الناس سبوكي سبوكي بريدج وين بريدج عنده أكثر أرموري أشوف الأرموري بريدج
Hello, welcome to the UEES Warhammer. This Javelin-class destroyer was originally built by Aegis Dynamics and has been in active service since 2832. Launching under the command of Captain Omar Singh, the ship initially served as a combat support vessel in the 2nd Fleet, 6th Battalion, a posting that put it close to the Vandal front. The Warhammer saw action during the fall of Caliban in 2884, where it protected retreating civilian and naval forces when the system ultimately fell, earning a ribbon for valor in the process. For the next several decades, the Warhammer transitioned between fleets in a variety of support and patrol positions, even participating in the UEE push to reclaim the Nexus system in the 2930s. Most recently, the Warhammer distinguished itself as the primary combat vessel to propel the outlaw group known as Xeno threat from the Stanton system. Since then, The Warhammer has been placed in dry dock for repairs, but is heading back to active service once this year's Invictus festivities are concluded. The room you're currently seated in is the main briefing room for the entire ship. Based around a hollow volume built by Microtech, the crew gathers here to discuss everything from battle strategies to repair schedules. The Marine detail assigned to this ship also uses this room to plan out their boarding actions or outline combat strategies. This room has even acted as a venue for off-duty activities, such as vid screenings or sporting event parties. We hope that you'll take the opportunity to explore the ship and get an up-close look at one of the vanguards of order. On behalf of Captain Metcalf and the rest of the crew, I want to wish you a fantastic Invictus. I hope we see you next year.
Xeno. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to the UEES Warhammer. This javelin...
Hello, everyone. My name's Lieutenant Horrigan, and as you can probably...
Welcome aboard the UEES Warhammer. To dispense part of this year's Invictus. Time to explain what life is like aboard the ship. I would like to remind you that the entire ship is not available for exploration, so please be respectful of unauthorized areas.
What the fuck? This shit. ما تقرطاس. Where this sucks. ايه سووا صحيح. اشترينا كل شيء. بنجر جاي. كارغو بانجا يكون شي واحد كان بيرات و ابارامو بغى يقرب المنطقة من العسكرية وكيراو عليه ما يزبلوش عارفة
Previous combat assist activated. Systems green. Launch complete.
Thank you, and please visit again.
القا المهم بقى باقي ما بغاو يساليو ما غيساليو بعد حاجه وحده بعد ملي كيهضروا على شي حاجه راه كتلقاها نعم كتلقاها يلاه ضربت واحد المثاليه بالبانكا راه بعد على الاقل نخافوا رست مثلا ما يكونش حاجه من كل دل واحد الحال مازال ما تسال كان جوج كان صادق كل يوم كاع ما يسال ما كيدخل هذا بنادم معيدين ما بقاش يقدر عليه بزاف علاش كاين الناس دابا ما تكون عندهم علامات سبيليه مرات تبان لي لا دوي لا هو الاوبتيميزاسيون اف بي اس انا المهم ما تعودش الريفيرونس كاين واحد المهم كاين باش تقول جبل تور ياه إيريڵīẓ دابا راه باقي في الطريق قطار الطريق درست مؤخرا يلاه داروا الميزاج مؤخرا انفيديا ريفلكس خاصك عندك انفيديا باش زعما تحس باللاتونس راها ميكرو كان بعيد ما كانش مزيان قلت لك الجو عمره ما يسالي هاد ستار سيتيزن المهم ولكن المهم بعد مثلا الله لقيتني كنت ساريت في الجافلان انا بغيت نضرب دويره واحده اخرى نضرب دويره داروا الجافلان هاد المره كتسارى فيه المهم هما راه ديجا كيدخلوا الفلوس في الحقيقه راه ما كاينش روست مثلا كروست كتلقاه هو مازال ما تسالى حتى الان هما عاد مؤخرا عاد حلوا المشكل ديال هذيك لا لاتونس ديال وخاصك تكون عندك انفيديا ديك انفيديا ريفلكس ريفلكس يمكن باش ينقصوا لا لاتونس غتكون باقا واحد نص ساعه فيه ماشي مشكل قبيله كنت كنطير حدا البانكال حتى البانكال المهم ديروا غير الاكستيريوم ديالو الانتيريور حاولت نشوف ليه بالكاميرا ما كاينش فيه ما دايرينش الانتيريور كاين لا جافلان دايرين الانتيريور ديالو وي الميكرو هذا جريتو لا ماشي كاسيون غير سنين ديال الاكسس انا جو بونس غادي بقات لهم واحد عامين شي غير توجد سكوادرون 42 نورمالمون غيكون موراه غتخرج لا ريليزين ديال ستار سيتيزن ولكن لقاو ما غيكونوا مازال ما ساهله غيخرجوا مثلا اخرجوا لا ريليزين ديال ستار سيتيزن مثلا بشي 4 لي سيستم ولا 5 لي سيستم ولا 10 لي سيستم ماكسيموم ويبقاو كل مره يفتحوا سيستم بسيستم مثلا بحال دابا هذا العام بوسي في الاخر العام غادي يزيدوا فايرو هاي الجارنا هما يمشي يطير ولا ما عرفت فين يمشي ونبقاو فيه نيت وشنو غير فين يمشي وبحال مارست باقي لحد الان من شوف شحال من عام ما كنقولوا مثلا راست المهم ماشي جو كبير ولكن بقاو كتلقى وهي شي حاجه زوينه علاش زعما الجو كل ما كان كيزيدوا فيه راه كل ما طولوا المده كل ما انت خرجتي منه راس مالك
Welcome aboard the UEES Warhammer. As part of this year's Invictus celebrations, I'd like to invite you to take a look around and get an up-close look at an active military vessel. Some of the actual crew members have graciously volunteered their time to explain what life is like aboard the ship. I would like to remind you that the entire ship is not available for exploration, so please be respectful of unauthorized areas.
مازال باقي غادي لا فولكان لا تزاد غيكون شي حاجه وعاد عاوتاني الجيم راه باقي الله ستريكتور ديالو زعما الاساسات ديالو راه مازال ما كاملينش يعني لا جاو اوبتيميزيو تقريبا غير داك الباتش باش يكون جوابل وصافي اما الا جيت تشوف باش تكون الاوبتيميزاسيون ديالو بصح راه خاصه وليت كما قلت هذاك انفيديا ريفلكس اللي زادو دابا في روست راه واحد الحاجه اللي كانت ناقصه الروست من شحال هادي ولكن حتى المره اللي زاد زادوها هادو دابا غتحسب لهم واحد تيخرج سكوادرون عاد تفهم تشوف ستار سيتيزن ولا كيتوبتيميزا هذا سكوادرون هو لا باز مال هو راه غيبقى هو لي كونفا دي كونت اساسي هذا الجابلمون فاتحين ما فاتحينوش كامل ولكن دايرين شي حاجه زوينين دابا جا البانكار غيطيح
Alright, let's settle down. My name's Lieutenant Commander Alderman. I run the turret complement aboard the Warhammer. That means I'm in charge of coordinating fire between our various gunners during a combat engagement in order to maximize combat effectiveness. When we aren't in combat, I strive to keep my team sharp by running through engagement drills and simulated encounters. Now, the Javelin comes standard with 15 turrets, 13 of which have embedded operators. There are 6 turrets like the one you see here that run along the side of the ship, each of which is equipped with a pair of size 7 cannons for large targets and a pair of size 4 Gatlings for smaller targets like fighters and even incoming missiles and torpedoes. We've got 4 more turrets on the bow of the ship, armed with size 7 energy cannons and 3 gunners on the underside for the same. All this firepower is coupled with a heavy payload of ordnance to make the Warhammer a real problem for all sizes of ship. Hence why we can be tasked to operate independently on patrols without support from the rest of the battlefield. During the Xeno threat incursion, our gunners were responsible for the destruction of over 70 hostile elements and several capital ships, as well as protecting the ship from incoming ordnance.
ديجا عندي مع كنلعب في ايطا قفص من هاد الايطا اللي كتشوف ملي كيكون الباتش يلاه خارج راه كتكون حالته حاله عاد كل اللايف راه بالنسبه لنا حنا بالنسبه لي انا راه النواور
Thank you and have a great Invictus.
بارد عليك يا تروازون بوتيتر يكون كاع سكوادرون كما قلتي نتايا تروازون قلت هي ديك تروازون بالنسبه لستار سيتيزن سكوادرون راه شي عامين ماكسيموم الله يحفظك المهم دوز 3 سنين وجويني ديك الساعات تلعب معانا بحال هاد التيست راه نيت هادشي دابا ابارامون كيديرو التيست حتى للسكوادرون بحال هاد التواشر كيزيدو مثلا كدير فيزيت ليهم وهذا راه كيديرو التيست سكوادرون دابا غيكونوا دابا بحال دي فاز في وسط الجيم غيكونوا بادورد ويلي تويتش صافي طل وارد خليها على الله بقاو شي نهار ما نبقاو نقولوا بدنا كاع نهضروا حنايا ولا تولي تكتب باللغه العربيه الفصحى باقي لي بعدا دابا باش ننتقل نشوف واش يسافروا كانوا يسافروا في وسطهم يسافروا في وسطهم
Welcome aboard the UEES Warhammer. As part of this year's
كاين
Invictus
يذكر ولكن
celebrations,
ما
I'd
المهم
like
ماشي
to
ديما
invite you
كندخل
to
فيه.
take a
كاين
look
عندي راه
around
في
and get an
اللي راه كاين
up-close look at an
تحت
active military
تويتش
vessel.
ما عرفتش باقي
Some of the
ولا
actual
لا.
crew members
انا راني
have
كنتغابر
graciously
واحد
volunteered
الوقيته
their
راه عاد
time
ستريميت
to
ديال مع
explain what
شحال
life is
شهر
like
ما
aboard the
ستريميت
ship.
تقريبا.
I would like to remind you that the entire ship is not
نورمالمون
available for
كاين اللين
exploration,
في
so
تويتش.
please be respectful of unauthorized areas. Thank you, and enjoy your visit.
المهم اجوتي دخل لي بعدا او موان من نكون داخل لي دابا ما داخلش لي في الحقيقه، ولكن راه كندخل لي مره ملي كنكون مثلا ندير مع الدراري ولا شي حاجه بحال هكا كنبغي نستعملو راه كنستعمل. راه كاين اللين ديال ديسكورد راه تلقى تحت.
Welcome aboard the UEES Warhammer. As part of this year's Invictus celebrations, I'd like to invite you to take a look around and get an up-close look at an active military vessel. Some of the actual crew members have graciously volunteered their time to explain what life is like aboard the ship. I would like to remind you that the entire ship is not available for exploration, so please be respectful of unauthorized areas. Thank you, and enjoy your visit.
اللي غنبدل هاد السيرفر باغي يدعدع. ديغراد هاد السيرفر حيت من قبيل هو مديغرادي في الحقيقة. والله لا كراشة. مشات لا فلو فين هنا صافي خرجوا سوا ضربة مزيان فهمت
Aegis combat system activated. Systems green. Landing gear retracted.
Thank you, and please visit again.
I will visit again. من الكرسي. Fuck.
Please proceed to assigned landing bay.
Missile, lock.
واو
Missile, lock. Missile, lock. Docking request initiated. Docking request denied. Landing gear deployed. Landing complete.
Landing complete. Have a pleasant stay.
Launch complete. Landing complete.
ايوا بارك عنا.